So we're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, feel free to ask any questions as we go. Make sure that you register your attendance in the link shown on the screen. And once again, you will have access to our emails. Feel free to contact any of us, and we'll go ahead and help you guys as much as possible. And with that, I'll send it over to Darren.
Darian.
Sure.
Darian.
Sure. So thank you, Luis, for the opportunity to present today. I just wanted to introduce myself and the institute that I work at, because as of now, we've not been able to participate on these calls. But I am a program officer at the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research. And as you'll learn later in this presentation, based on your research interests, and as Luis has kind of alluded to, based on your research interests, you'll likely be interacting with different institutes at NIH. And so I just wanted to give you a preview of kind of what we do at the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, also known as NIDCR. So we are pretty much the institute at NIH. We're one of the 27 institutes and centers, and our main mission is around advancing the nation's oral health and really improving dental, oral, and craniofacial health. As most of NIH, we do that a lot through our research programs. So we conduct basic, translational, clinical, and also community-based research. We also support research training and career development. So no matter what stage you are in your research career, there are opportunities at NIDCR if you're interested in dental, oral, and craniofacial research. And we want the research that we do to have impact, to make an impact. And so we do want to share our research findings with various stakeholders. And again, we want to really, the goal is really to improve the oral health of the nation. And also do want to mention, and really, again, excited to be on this call because it's important for our institute, as it is with all of NIH, to really ensure that we have a diverse group of researchers. And so we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity and is aware of these opportunities that are available. My program specifically is the Health Disparities and Inequities Research Program. And so a program can be thought of kind of as a portfolio of research projects. So I oversee a portfolio of funded research projects within this area of health disparities as it relates to oral health. And so just some characteristics of the types of projects that I oversee are listed on this slide. But we really have projects in my portfolio that are focused on reducing health disparities and inequities as it relates to oral health. And a lot of times that's through culturally appropriate, tailored interventions. So we want to be able to test interventions to improve oral health in communities. Many times, this type of research is what we consider multi-level. So the research is not focusing solely on the individual person, but we would like to understand how family dynamics, how community, how neighborhood and built environment all impact oral health, and again, potential interventions that can be conducted to improve oral health. Many times these interventions really do have a community-based participatory focus. And so in terms of developing these interventions, the investigators will really work closely with community members to make sure the research is appropriate and is acceptable to the community. So it really is kind of a partnership to be able to conduct clinical research. Research, focuses on health service delivery, policies, how that impacts oral health disparities and inequities that we see. And really, a lot of our recent research is focused on technologies as well. So innovations and technologies and how that can be used to overcome some of these barriers and challenges that people have in accessing oral health. And so with that, again, just wanted to introduce myself and my institute. And again, if you have any interest in research related to oral health, you can feel free to contact me. My information is listed in the slide set, and I'd be happy to connect you with the appropriate people. So again, thank you, and look forward to this presentation.
This week, we're gonna give you a quick overview on how to use NIH Reporter. And using this system, you'll be able to see what is being funded by the NIH and the different institutes. You're gonna be able to find collaborators, see the abstracts of the funded research. And it also has many other uses depending on what information you wanna find. For example, you would like to do a collaboration with a specific institution and you want to know if they have funding similar to your research area. So you can see what kind of funding that organization is doing by looking up the name of the school in the system. You can also find the funding by a specific PI. So if you're interested in collaborating with somebody, you can also see if that person has funding that will be related to your area of research. You can also go more general and find what is being funded by state if you wanted to. Another way to do it is by finding, looking for the actual text. So you might want to be looking for a specific grant mechanism that has a word in the title or in the abstract of that mechanism, and you can narrow down your search that way. And you can mix, so you could look for a person that has funding in a specific area, or you can try to find another collaborator in Puerto Rico by looking at who's being funded in Puerto Rico in a specific topic. To be able to use the system to the max, you really need to know how to use the NIH grant number to your benefit. So the coding in an NIH grant number actually has a meaning. And for you, the most important part is going to be the activity code and the IC that is funding it. So if you're looking to submit a diversity supplement, you might be looking for somebody that has an R01 grant. And if you're looking for let's say an R01 grant in dental, you type in R01 and DE, and that will give you the R01s in dental. And you can narrow the search to the state that you want to look for. So when you see in Reporter, you can search by project details and you can type R01, the 2-letter code of the IC that you're looking for. Combine that with the state and you can find all the R01s that are funded in your state, for example. So these are some examples. I did a quick search, just typed in R01 and having the word mentoring in the title. And I could do a collaboration with somebody in Chapel Hill if I wanted to, or Michigan, as some examples. I also did a search for cardiovascular research being funded by the Institute of Nursing. And as you can see, nursing has cardiovascular research being funded by different mechanisms, R01s, K01s, R21s, and K23. So if you wanted to find out, somebody that could help you out getting a career development award, which is a K01, you might want to contact Veronica in Yale University, for example. And when you click, when you click on the details, it will give you the email of that person, so you can get their emails and contact them. Any questions about NIH reporters and a way to find what you're looking for? And I lost the view to see everybody. Anybody has any questions?
No, I don't have a question.
Dawn, I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Super. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process of locating a funding opportunity. I think of the grant application process as having a certain number of constraints, and that generating an application involves finding the solution to the problem of getting funding while satisfying all those constraints. I particularly think of the constraints as having a lot of influence at the very beginning of the process. One important constraint is figuring out a likely opportunity for you to apply to. As you all have surely realized by now, the NIH has a lot of different funding opportunities, so figuring out the one that best suits your needs and at which you have a decent chance of succeeding is an example of a very important constraint on the process. Another example of a constraint is taking your CV and gathering it along with the CVs of all your collaborators and looking at all the peer-reviewed publications listed on all the CVs. This collection of papers will likely determine what topics and approaches the NIH peer review process will deem you qualified to study, for example. Another constraint is looking around at your institution and seeing what kinds of resources you and your collaborators have available with which to do science, from applying for grant funding, local funding to start a grant funding process, machinery, equipment, access to certain populations of participants. All those things will define, at least to some extent, what kind of an approach you can take in your science. Next slide, please. So another example of a constraint is determining whether your institution is eligible to apply for some of the opportunities we've described so far and will continue to do so. In the next slide, we're going to discuss a little bit more about idea states. So going next bullet down, is the applicant organization may not receive more than research support from the NIH totaling more than $6 million per year. All right, that's the restriction for the R15 award, which are made for teaching-oriented institutions at either the undergrad or graduate levels, and we talked about those in a previous session. The last two bullets are restrictions of the SPAD program. SPAD stands for Sponsored Programs Administration Development, and the SPAD program is to increase or help establish offices of sponsored programs at institutions that don't apply for too much funding. Offices of Sponsored Programs, or OSPs, or the local office at your institution that helps investigators apply for funding, really help define the culture of research. And the people who work in that office tend to be quite savvy about how the funding process works. So for institutions that want to improve their culture of research and research training, applying for this funding can help all the investigators at that institution be more in their applications. Next slide is all about the Idea States Institutional Development Award. If your institution resides in an idea state, then you're eligible, and all NIH ICs participate in this program. All the PIs and the performance sites must be in idea eligible states. And the way the program works is you apply to the NIH for either an R1 or an R15 award. And if your application is scored, but not funded, but your score isn't too very far away from funding range, then the IC to which you have applied may choose to ask for co-funding from the Idea State funding at the Idea State Fund, pardon me, that's at NIGMS for the first 2 years of the project up to $320,000. ICs may request co-funding once a year. It's usually in around January or February up through about early April. So your application needs to have been reviewed and scored in time for the IC to nominate you. And then the home IC still has to fund the other part of the project, and they still have to fund all the years after year 2. So it really involves enthusiasm on the part of the Idea State Fund, which actually is they're pretty enthusiastic about distributing the monies they have to Idea States. So you should definitely contact the program officer once you know who the officer is who's assigned to your application, and you should let them know that you'd like to be considered for Idea State funding. And the decisions are usually made around June or July. So now let me pass control of the slides to my colleague Ali, and next slide, please.
Alrighty, so as Dawn described, the Idea States are states that typically or historically have not received as much NIH funding. And there are several components to Idea State programs. One of these components that I'm going to talk to you about right now is related to the Small Business Program. So there are regional technology transfer accelerator hubs for Idea States. So as you can see in this image, there are 4 different regions, and each of these 4 regions will have a hub that provides infrastructure and can help build an entrepreneurial culture at the Idea institutions within that region. And so the purpose of this is to help develop and implement a comprehensive program for promoting entrepreneurship, small business finance skills, technology transfer, and other business skills that can help move discoveries and technologies into commercial products. And these hubs also generate educational tools and provide training, mentoring, and coaching for people who are interested in turning technologies into commercial products. Next slide, please. And so this slide shows you the 4 different Idea regions, and as I mentioned, each region has a hub. So that hub is the program name, and it's tied to a small business concern. It is partnered with a major academic institution or a major academic partner, and there also are links to each of the hub websites on this slide for your reference later. Next slide, please. And so the goal of these hubs is to foster biomedical entrepreneurship in Idea States. So this little graphic over here, SBC stands for Small Business Concern. So that is the hub that will interact with all of the Idea States in its region, provide skills development, mentoring, education, training, and outreach, and will do so to help promote an entrepreneurship ecosystem. So the goal here is to create and amplify an ecosystem of resources and best practices to help academics become successful entrepreneurs. So if you're located in an Idea State and interested in the small business program, this is a great resource. If you are not in an Idea State, you can always contact the scientific program officers that are associated to the institute you're thinking about applying for a small business grant through. And now that is the end of this slide. I think Louis.
Now I'm going to pass it on to Patrick Brown. who's a program officer at NIGMS and former
Hello.
teacher.
So now we're going to go back into NIH Reporter, because many of the activity codes that we're talking about have restrictions on eligibility based on how much research project grants an institution might have. And so we're going to show you how to go into the NIH Reporter and determine how much RPG funding or research project grant funding your institution might have. So what you would do is you would just Google NIH Reporter, and you would land hopefully on this, which shows a screenshot where you have quick links, research, organizations, workforce, and funding, and you would click on or just hover over the funding tab. And when you hover, a drop-down menu will appear, and you can click on the bullet that shows awards by location. And if you click on that, you get to the next slide. And here is a place for you to enter some information to search for a particular organization. So if you go to the bottom right there, there's a place to enter your organization name. Let's just say the University of Mississippi or whatever your university is. You enter that information there, and then you click on the select button to the right of that entry location. And then you click on the bottom where it says submit query. And then a new page will show up, and it'll show you all of the funding at that particular institution for the particular year that was entered on the previous slide. And for an example here is, I'm not sure what institution this is or what year it is, but it shows that the research project grants that are non-SBIR STTR, which is the important row or here, is $419,000. So if you were trying to apply for an R15 or a SPAD program or some of the other programs where you have to have less than $6 million or less than $7.5 million, you would see for this particular year, you're under that cap. And you need to do this for some programs over the last 3 fiscal years. So you have to do this for each fiscal year and then average that out. I think that's the end of that. Is there another slide? Nope, that's it for me.
Now it comes back to me. So another institutional characteristic that we talked about is, are you a minority serving institution, and the amount of Pell Grant that your students receive. So you can do this yourself if you go into iPads and you find the College Navigator website. That College Navigator website, you will enter the name of the school that you're looking for. And once you enter the name, it will send you to a screen where they have a lot of different tabs. And usually the ones that you're going to look at are going to be at enrollment and financial aid. So if you click on enrollment, you will scroll down until you find the enrollment at your institution. So how many Asian students you have, how many African American students you have, Hispanic, Native Hawaiian, etc. And if you click at the financial aid tab, it will let you know how much Pell Grants your institution is receiving. And if the threshold that we talked about before was 25%, and as we can see here, they're meeting that threshold because they have 100% Pell Grant recipients. Anybody has any questions about how to figure out the eligibility or anything that we have discussed up to this point? You can ask in Spanish, English. So Dawn, take it away. You're muted.
You are correct. You were correct. So, this slide asks, are you eligible? And it begins with the question, what is your career stage? And there are 2 acronyms tossed around, ESI and NI, that stand for respectively early stage investigator and new investigator. So an early stage investigator is it has this very specific definition, and there are multiple caveats. So, for example, you need to be so many years out from the last period of your training. But if you've had to interrupt that period of time for a variety of reasons, such as caring for a family member or the birth of a child or other things, the ESI stage gets extended for you. So it's important to go look it up and see if you might qualify. Same with new investigator. You also want to take a hard look at your publishing record and your funding history and your training record. You want to look at your publications and your preliminary data and see if you can show expertise in the techniques you're thinking about proposing in your application by either of those methods, publications or the preliminary data. Next slide, please.
That's me. So
There
we
we go.
did the homework of opening an ERA Commons account. Yeah, we are not going to check who did it or not. If you did it already, you kind of have an idea of what it looks like. And if you haven't gone into ERA Commons account yet, we just wanted to let you know that this is how it looks. So you're going to enter your name, demographic information, employment information, reviewer information, training information, education, and that education tab is where NIH is going to determine if you're an early career investigator. Because in that education tab, you're going to enter the years that you graduated. So in the case of this example, the person graduated in June 2003. So they're already more than 10 years away from their degree. So they are not an early stage investigator. So make sure that you enter the right date when you're doing your profile. Any questions about the importance of your profile or if you're an early career investigator? If you had any situations while you were training, you can there's some extensions that you can apply for, but please contact your program officer for that. Dawn, Angela, back to you.
Awesome. So thank you, Luis, for that wonderful overview of NIH Reporter and ERA Commons. And now Angela and I will walk you through some steps to think about during the grant and planning process. Next slide, please.
You want to be in the funding opportunities announcement?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so that's me first. Okay, so in an earlier class, we emphasized the importance of reading the funding opportunity announcement carefully so you see here, the first bullet is just a reminder. So we want to point out that you should always look at the important date section and know your submission line. Also, you want to plan things out. So people plan things out in several different ways. For example, some people like to use Excel spreadsheets, and some people like to tape big pieces of paper up on the wall, while other people like to use project planning software. It doesn't matter what you decide to do because it all works toward the same end figure. You would want to write your due date and work backwards. Develop a timeline, pad some of your interim deadlines with some extra days or weeks, and be sure to let your office-sponsored projects know when to expect your application. They'll be working behind the scenes to make sure that your application process goes smoothly. If they haven't submitted an application like yours before in the past, they will contact the help desk and ask them to walk them through the process. Like everything else in life, when you depend on professionals, try to give them early notice so they can give you their best support. Dawn?
Great. So look over the details in the FOA and study the related notices. Look to see what documents are required in your application versus which are suggested. When you have questions, you can get a lot of great answers from the listed NIH staff on the FOA. from your Office of Sponsored Research, which may be able to put you in touch with other people at your institution who have applied for the same or similar funding, as well as experienced colleagues at your institution, your current, or mentors from earlier stages in your career. By the way, pro tip, finding copies of applications for similar opportunities to the ones you're considering that either succeeded or failed, and the printed reviews are one of the very best ways to learn grant writing. If your institution doesn't generate a lot of applications, you can still ask around and see if there are any that just didn't succeed. You can also ask mentors and colleagues, maybe from earlier parts in your career, if they can help you out. And at the bottom here, I have listed a hot link to a really cool website run by NIAID, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, which has sample applications and summary statements of real applicants who have donated their work for 12 different mechanisms, including R01, R03, and R15. Next slide, please. Back to you, Angela.
Thank you, Dawn. So this slide here is just for completeness. We already went over the funding opportunity announcement last week, but we wanted you to keep in mind the importance of making sure that the institute that you're interested in is a participant of the funding opportunity announcement that you are considering applying to. Next slide. Okay, so planning ahead. So we would like to give you a little bit of an idea of what the timeline for your application looks like from the NIH perspective. Of course, from your perspective, there are months of hard work writing and rewriting and talking to your colleagues and conducting pilot research and so forth. But from our perspective, it's so important to have that initial program officer conversation. So that's first on the list. Then you submit your application, of course, by the deadline. Some applications get reviewed by the Center for Scientific Review within NIH, and other applications get reviewed within the in-house review process for the specific institute. No matter where the application gets reviewed, a review officer is in charge of assigning applications to a study section. Then they would assign each application to a pair of reviewers, or in some cases, 3 reviewers on the panel. Each reviewer reads all of their assigned applications, assigns each a summary and evaluation of the application that usually ranges in length to up to like a page. The chair of the panel then reviews the preliminary scores and evaluations and schedules about the top half of the applications for discussion when the panel meets. During this process, the final funding decisions and awards are made. Dawn?
Angela, I think we have a little error in that paragraph that you just went over. The panel does not make funding decisions and they don't make awards. And I feel like I just wanted to, I don't know how we managed to get that sentence in the wrong spot there.
Yeah, I think that should have been in
another spot, but I just wanted to
Exactly.
mention to y'all that the panel does not make funding decisions or awards. Oopsie, sorry about that, y'all. So it's common for ICs to make a lot of funding decisions in the summer, right before the end of the fiscal year at the end of September. The entire process of, from when you apply to when the award gets made takes about 9 months. And that's only if you succeed on the first submission. One thing I was a little bit surprised about when I joined the NIH was that I discovered that virtually everyone has to resubmit their applications. When I worked on the other side where you are now, I thought lots of prominent investigators at elite institutions probably got funded on their very first go-round. But now that I'm here working within the NIH, I've discovered that very few applications get funded on the first submission. However, when investigators receive a score on an application that does not get funded, which is actually just about everybody, And then they resubmit carefully by addressing the concerns raised by the reviewers and providing stronger justification for the choices they do retain. Their chances on the second submission are often much better. Fun fact. And back to you, Angela. Kit, I see you with your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question or would you like to put it in the chat?
Well, I'm not able to put it in chat.
Then ask away.
Do you get feedback once you get rejected so you know how to mend the mistakes that you made?
So there's sort of two levels of feedback. If the panel schedules your application in the top half of all the applications it received, then the panel discusses your application. And what you get back in terms of feedback is richer in those cases because the scientific review officer writes a summary of your application and what they felt were the main issues behind, that drove the score you received. And you also get evaluative summaries from each of the people who were assigned your application, and they write up that paragraph or that page. They often go back and rewrite it after discussing your application with everybody else on the panel. Okay, because their thoughts are richer about your application. They're informed by all the other people on the panel. There were statisticians, there were methodologists, there were people who were experts in different aspects of your science that they don't know that much about. And so then they come back and they sometimes rewrite their evaluation of your application based on the insights they got from that discussion. If your application is in the bottom half of all applications, approximately speaking, and you are not an ESI, ESIs get to jump. They always get discussed, I believe, is the case. But if you're in the bottom half of all applications, then your assigned reviewer reads your application and they write you an evaluation, a paragraph to a page, and that's all you get because you weren't discussed, you didn't, get all the added from the review official and everything like that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Super. All right. Any other questions? Great. All right, Angela, I think you're on here.
Okay. So this slide is really just tying together a lot of things that we've already talked about thus far in this course. So at the bottom of the slide, there are two important hot links. The first link will take you to the formal guide on grants and funding information and opportunities. The second link will take you to the official NIH guidance on how to go about applying for funding, and it includes tips and strategies for planning and organizing your application. Next slide, please.
So, of course, you fully realize that the NIH is quite complex. There's lots of different funding institutes or centers. Here in this slide, we happen to have the Center for Scientific Review in green to alert you to the presence of that. We've been teaching you ways of managing the complexity in this series of webinars. You can use NIH Reporter and easily locate the ICs who fund the science you want to do. You can talk to the program official who often can really clarify things. By the way, quick comment, when we talk, we actually mean talk and not just email. So it's really great to just get on the phone and talk to the program official. And they often expect that and are more than happy to schedule that time for you. Next slide, please.
Okay, it's back to me. Okay, so we're going to talk about who at NIH can answer your questions about submitting your application, after you submit and after your review. So something that can confuse applicants is when they write to someone about their application and they don't hear back very quickly. This can happen for a couple of reasons, however. One common issue is that different sections of NIH are designed with the type of firewall between them where the different sections are supposed to act as a check and balance on the others. Dawn?
The structure is the relationship between review and program. Program staff are in charge of the science. Review staff are in charge of the review. And grants management staff are in charge of the finances and budget. Before you submit your application, the program and review officers can answer your questions. Submit, only the scientific review officer is supposed to interact with you. Once your review is completed, and your application has been evaluated and scored, and that information has been shared with program, your program official is once again free to answer your questions. Next slide, please. So in this next section, we're going to teach you how to use Reporter Matchmaker to identify program officers who work with the projects that most look like yours. Angela, take it over.
Thanks, Dawn. So again, sorry. Okay, so again, we bring up the FOA. It's just to refresh your memory again. So please remember that the agency contacts of the funding opportunity announcement has a link to the list of scientific research contacts whose job is to give you more complete information about their institute, specific requirements, eligibility, and the funding announcement itself. So they are frequently referred to as program officials, program officers, or program staff. Next slide, please.
You're muted.
Always unmute yourself before you start talking. So to use this Matchmaker mechanism, you want to go to NIH Reporter, and Matchmaker is a tab on the NIH Reporter database. So you just click on that tab, and in the following text box, you could enter a paper, a grant abstract, or any other text you want to search on, up to 15,000 characters. And then you just click on the Similar Program Officials button at the bottom of the text box. Next slide, please. So if you were interested in finding program officials who work closely with mental health projects, you would type these words into the text box. You see up here at the top, and it's a copy and paste from materials you already have into this text box. So I've just done a very simple thing here with, mental health. And if you do this in NIH Reporter today, you would get on the left here a list of the institutes that fund this research, which of course on the left, the tallest bar is NIMH, of course. Next is NIDA. Well, that makes sense. Drug abuse and mental health, they're pretty interlinked. National Institute on Child Health and disease, I think, is next. NIMHD, National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities, National Institute on Aging, and then National Institute on Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse. So that all makes sense. The activity codes are the most common sources of funding for this research. So down below here on the list of program officials, you've got the list of up to 134 program officials, starting with those whose grant portfolio most closely matches the text you put in. And then once you get that list, as you can see here, my colleague Hill, Lauren D. at NIMH is the, she has, I guess, about 26 projects assigned to her. And you can click on her name, and then that will bring up the list of the active grants for whom that person is program official, and you can look them over. And if it really looks like that's the kind of research you're looking at, then it goes back, go back to the search results and grab the email address of that program official to start a conversation. Next slide, please.
Oh, okay, that's me. Okay, so as Dawn explained, so this is the same instructions, like if you wanted to look up a project focusing on cocaine addiction and brain effects for NIDA. So you would follow the same process that she explained. And so you would have, you see the words in the text box. And then once you click on the similar program officials button, you would generate a list of 78 program officials from the matched projects. And so the way the list is set up, the way the list is set up, the program officials are listed in order as importance of the projects that are related to your search term. So you see Roger's name is listed first. So I would click on his name first because his grants would relate more to the search terms that I typed in. And so I would check the grants, and if it's a good match, matches my project, I would go back and click on the PO email address, and then I would reach out to him. Next slide. Oh.
Any questions from anybody? Spanish, English, text?
So just a quick review. Remember why you want to talk to the program official before you're submitting the application. You want to talk to them because you want to find out if the institute is enthusiastic about your research area or if there's a better fit. You want to perhaps get clarification on which study section might be ideal. The program official might coach you that the methodology you have in mind, i.e. qualitative or mixed method methodology, would be more at home in one study section versus another. And now you've got that great guidance. You can put that the preferred study section in your cover email, the cover letter for your application. You can confirm that you're working with the current and appropriate FOA. You can get suggestions for alternative programs, FOAs, or institutes. And if you have questions about your budget or your scope of work, if you're applying for an R15 and you wonder if the project you're proposing is a little too big or a little too small, they'll give you some thoughts about what their institute thinks about those things. So next slide, please. So here's your homework for this week, which is to use NIH reporter to identify a possible program official to contact and an IC that might be interested in your application. So hopefully during the workshop so far, you've got your eye on a SCORE application or an R15 or an R1 or whatever, a mechanism you have in mind. And so now why don't you do some research trying to find the right program official and IC that you think might be a good match for your work. And with that, does anybody else, do any of my colleagues have anything or a question from any of the attendees before we wrap things up for this Friday afternoon?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, so for some reason I cannot raise my hand nor write a question in the chat. So I have a question regarding the scoring. So yes. After the application had been successfully submitted, and it goes, past the first filters that is going through the IC,
yes.
When it gets reviewed, so if it's in the top half, it gets reviewed. If it's not, it's just not discussed.
It's always reviewed. Okay. So here's the narrative from start to finish. So we haven't held the panel yet. So the scientific review official figures out what expertise is needed on the panel, adds extra experts if they need it. Then they assign all the applications to the different members of the panel. Every application gets 2 or sometimes 3 reviewers. And each reviewer gives a preliminary score to each application. Then the panel chair arranges the panel discussion, and they typically take the top half of the applications and schedule them to be discussed.
Okay.
And the bottom half of the applications got reviewed and they got evaluated and they got scored because the individual reviewers who were assigned those applications did that, and they did provide a score, and that score stands. Okay, so
Okay. So even if, for example, if I am in the bottom half, I'm still going to get comments and a preliminary score.
Yes, you
So I could improve
will.
it
And
for, okay.
it's just not as satisfying because the full panel discussion is so much richer and more detailed. And so the statistician learns a lot about like what it's like to do community engaged research from the person in the panel who's the expert on that, right? So if they were assigned your application, they can come back. It's better to be in the, well, of course it's better to be in the top half.
Yeah, of course. Totally agree.
But
So
you always get scored and you always get feedback.
Your summary statement will have the comments from the reviewers. The only thing that you're going to be missing is the paragraph on the panel discussion.
Right. Yeah.
Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just add something onto that. So the top half often get discussed, the bottom half don't, but the reviewers are also offered the opportunity, if they feel that there's one that they think should be discussed, even though it's in the bottom half, they can rescue that application and recommend that the rest of the review panel discuss it. And sometimes it doesn't happen, but sometimes it does.
Very good point, Patrick. Thank you for that. And don't all ESIs get discussed? Isn't that right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I believe ESIs always get discussed.
What is an ESI?
Thank
What
you
is
very-
it? What is an
Early stage
ESI?
investment.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we're open for any questions. Doesn't matter if it's a topic that we discussed today or not. So if you have any questions about anything related to NIH.
Yes, throughout the discussion, I was not able to use the chat like in order to put my name in to register. So I just sent you an email, Louis. I was able to raise my hand, but I was not able to use the chat to register it like you suggested in the beginning.
Oh, so when you click the link at the beginning, it didn't let you register?
I was trying to use the maybe I'm just confused.
I think other people had the same difficulty. I don't think you're confused. I think there was something challenging about that.
You should be able to go to this website and hopefully register.
Do you see it, the short link up on the title slide?
Yes, I do. Okay, I see it. Let me write that down.
Yes, you can use either the URL or the QR code. And we put it over there because not all of you have access to the chat because of the different institutions that they use different servers in Microsoft, so they don't always share the chat.
It would be helpful for us to be able to document how many people are coming and what institutions they're from, because we want to continue, we want to get NIH support to do more outreach like this, and it's kind of helpful for us to show what we're doing.
Sure, that makes sense.
We appreciate you being meticulous despite the chat not working. Thank you.
Any questions about how to find opportunities, submit the grants? Any questions in general? If not, remember that you can reach us by email. If you want the slides, send me an email to this address, luis.cubano, and I'll send you the slides. Patrick, do you want to say anything about the programs you're involved in, since you were not able to say anything last week?
Well, we can schedule him for a proper bit with a slide and everything next week.
Yeah,
Well-
Patrick's a different area of research than us, so
Yeah.
he'll be able to help people that we have not covered. That's
true. Well, how about we do that and wish everybody a restful weekend.
Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank
The
you.
seminar.
Very welcome.